Let me take a moment and talk about Riverside.fm. It allows you to record studio quality audio and up to 4K video. When you need to record audio and video, Riverside.fm can do it. So if you're looking for a hero platform for all your recording needs, from podcasts to webinars to any video content, Riverside.fm. I've got a promo code for you where you'll receive a 30% discount on the first 3 months of your subscription. I'll give it to you twice. The promo code is SHIPIT. All one word, SHIPIT, and you'll pick up a 30% discount on your first 3 months of your subscription. Riverside.fm.
We continue the story of the Franklin All-Stars of 1903 from last week's early Pro Football Focus and the Scandal series. Both shared that story. Inspired by the great PFRA historian Bob Carroll and Company's 1980 Coffin Corner article, we'll tell the story of the top team in pro football in 1903. Coming up in a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with PigskinDispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com, and welcome to the Pigpen once again, your portal to positive football history. And what could be more positive than a championship? One of the great teams in pro football history, and it's sort of unknown only by a couple of newspaper articles from 1903 and a Coffin Corner PFRA posting in 1980 that talks about the great Franklin, Pennsylvania All-Stars Club. Now, we alluded to this at a couple articles that we posted and podcasts we posted last week. First of all, in our early pro football series, we talked about the first NFL that happened in 1902, and we also talked about football's World Series, the first year that happened in 1902 in Madison Square Gardens. It was a tournament to try to promote football in an indoor arena and sell some seats and make a little bit of money for the Garden. But we also, in our Scandals and Scoundrels series last Wednesday, we talked about Franklin, Pennsylvania and Oil City, Pennsylvania, and a little bit of a scandal and controversy that rose between those two teams that ended up having Franklin build a team of all-stars that they paid big money for. Not really sure how much they paid for, but they built this great team, and Oil City backed out of it at the last minute when they found out they had no chance of winning it. All bets were off. $20,000 was invested in the banks in escrow the year before betting on this game. It was supposed to be played on Thanksgiving Day 1903, but that game was all awash because there's nobody to play. But the General Charles Miller of the National Guard and his manager, Dave Prince, they had invested a lot of capital in putting this team together of players from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and, all the colleges in between. Some of the greatest players in football in 1903. They had this great roster, a big payroll, and they scheduled some games. They got some games from nearby towns of Pittsburgh and Jamestown, New York, Youngstown, Ohio, and some other Pennsylvania squads that came here and there. But by no means were they making enough revenue to pay for this high payroll that they put together, basically to defeat Oil City from the embarrassment they faced in 1902 when Oil City did the same thing to them. So we had this tournament that was played in 1902 by Tom O'Rourke, the head of the Garden in those days. He came up with the idea of providing a holiday revenue for his vacant arena, Madison Square Garden. And so he put together another football World Series for 1903. He wanted to make it bigger and better than the year before because they had some promising turnout at that original one. Well, the Watertown Red Blacks in 1903, just as they did 2 years prior, claimed that they were the best football team in the land. And if you remember, though, the squad declined an invite by O'Rourke to play in the Garden Tourney, and thus their claim almost lost some merit. Even though they did have their entire backfield from the Red Blacks represented as they played for the Syracuse Athletic Club, who were the eventual winners of the 1902 Football World Series in the Madison Square Garden. Now, the PFRA article tells us the 1903 announcement of the Red Blacks was not completely unwarranted. Watertown had played a tougher schedule than Franklin, because Franklin, remember, was undefeated. They scored 400-some points to 0 against their opponents. Watertown, well, they had a 14-game slate. They showed a couple of ties and one loss, which was to the university named Bucknell. A rematch with Bucknell later on in the season saw Watertown totally dismantle the college team, so they sort of got some credit for that. So they had 1 loss, 2 ties. Franklin had 0 losses and I believe like 11 or 12 wins. And for some reason, similar to 1902, the claim of being the best was given some credence to Watertown's Red Blacks by the so-called Eastern football experts of the day. And the fact that the Red-Black running trio that was on that 1902 squad, that sort of helped erase the memory of Watertown's refusal to risk their reputation in 1902. Now, that Coffin Corner article says, instead of ignoring the 1903 series, Watertown jumped into it with both feet. They volunteered as sponsors of the tournament and even put up $2,000 in prize money, $1,250 for the winner and a remainder for second place, confidently expecting to carry the lion's share back home. O'Rourke and Company was planning an even bigger spectacle in the second rendition of the Madison Square Garden event. More games were added. Gaelic football and high school level contests were slated, and the quality of the main events of the teams was much improved. All in all, 15 games of football would be played in just 6 days in mid-December. Joining the Red Blacks in the main tournament bracket was the Orange, New Jersey Athletic Club, those Franklin All-Stars, and the Oreos Athletic Club of Asbury Park, New Jersey. The defending champions from Syracuse, they declined their invitation to challenge of playing and defending their title in 1903. And Franklin not only wanted to play and show off their powerful roster to prove their dominance was real, but their leaders, National Guard Major General Charles Miller and Coach Dave Prince and other backers of Franklin football wanted to claim the prize money to help offset some of the finances they invested to the team in the first place. General Miller knew that any of the prize money would go to the players. And what he was calculating on was the Big Apple gambling on the game and to help line his pockets. The field was set, and it was supposed to commence in mid-December 1903, and the PFRA historians tell us of the preparation of the event. Preparing the garden for football was a huge job. The 6-day bicycle races closed on Saturday night. Before the crowd was out of the arena, workmen began ripping up the track and floor on Sunday. 500 loads of dirt were dumped and spread across the surface. The 1902 field, which had been laid out on the earth under the floor, had been criticized as being sticky and holding. Then on Monday morning, a huge steamroller came in and packed everything down. During the afternoon, the yard lines were laid out and the goalposts were set in place. So we had a big dirt pile that was spread out and smooth in the bottom of Madison Square Garden, so not a blade of grass on the field. Monday, December 14th, the 1/3 scale gridiron playing surface at just 75 yards from goal line to goal line was ready as the crowds of just over 3,000 people witnessed the initial tilt, according to New York Sun's report the next day. But it was far less than expected by the promoters. Oddly enough, the largest audience of the entire series was for the high school all-star game that was played on Saturday, December 19th in an afternoon matinee, and not for any of the professional contests. Night 1 did have some great football played despite the low attendance numbers. It opened with a local match of the Olympic Athletic Club defeating the Knickerbocker Football Club 6-0. And there was some extra entertainment in this heated opening act too. The New York Sun on December 15th reported this quite descriptive and modern-day, not politically correct account. It said, T. Murphy, the Olympic center, was a little fat fellow whose paunch made it hardship for him to navigate. In the midst of fierce scrimmage, somebody dealt him a cruel blow on the nose and then kneed him in the stomach. He sank down, but was soon revived. Well, that melee led to some fisticuffs throughout the rest of the hard-fought game, and eventually law enforcement had to react. Later on in the evening, another great game commenced, as the Watertown 11 had a tougher-than-expected time with the undersized Oreos Athletic Club, but the Red Blacks finally prevailed 5-0. The following evening, it was time for Franklin to be center stage of the Garden as they faced a nearby Orange Athletic Club. The New York Times, in December 16, 1903, printed an account of the game that saw a fight between the opposing tackles of Blondie Wallace from Franklin and a former University of Penn Quaker star that played for the New York Philadelphians a year earlier and then aided Syracuse late as a replacement, and a certain Jimmy Hughes from Orange that got into a scrap in one of the game's first plays. Again, two of New York's finest had to rush onto the field to break up the gladiators. Blondie Wallace was no stranger to controversy and getting into fisticuffs. We've talked about him multiple times throughout our articles. Greg Fissery had, in his great book on his great-grandfather, Bob Shiring, talks about Blondie Wallace being a foe of Shiring and playing for the Canton Bulldogs and Shiring playing for Massillon Tigers. And Blondie Wallace, we've read a couple times from the early accounts we read last week, playing for the New York Philadelphians All-Star game, was also sort of that dark figure and always had a little bit of scandalous to him. And soon the teams got to playing ball again, and it was another former Penn Quaker that led the charge for Franklin, PA squad as Curly Davidson, who ran in a second half score to lead the All-Stars to a 12-0 dispatch of Orange. Now, with this game set up that everybody had waited for, a showdown between Watertown's Red Blacks and Franklin's All-Stars to settle once and for all who the top team in football in 1903 truly was. The PFRA tells of the hubbub all around town leading up to the feature game of the tourney. No one could prove that either team held back, so to sucker rival bettors, both sides were encouraged by the other's showing. All day Wednesday and right up until the game time Thursday night, Watertown and Franklin supporters were scurrying around Gotham to get down every last cent on their favorites. The night started off with New York Tribune, with the Olympic AC dispatching the Mohawk AC to claim the local New York title. And for the main event, the big boys of 1903 football, there was an interesting bit of promotional fanfare, was that the officiating crew for the big game, former Ivy League All-Americans Walter Booth, Big Bill Edwards, and Frank Hinkey trotted out on the makeshift indoor dirt field, dressed more like they were going to church or the opera than to attend to creating a fair and level playing field for the Gritters. Patent leather shoes, spotless white gloves, and high top hats added flair that caught everyone's attention. More than one report suggested that they looked ready to officiate a funeral more so than a football game, and after the game started, maybe that was not too far from the truth. The game kicked off for the Watertown, getting the ball and moving it all the way down to the Franklin 15-yard line, but then left the drive scoreless when they turned it over on downs. Franklin's All-Stars then proceeded to run right through the Red Blacks almost at will. Two almost effortless touchdowns paved the way for a fantastic football 11 of General Miller to coast to a 12-0 victory. The PFRA article tells us that though there may be one of the more memorable plays was near the end of the contest when Franklin's offensive plan was to knock down official Frank Hinkey in his full-on black and white tuxedo to the raw brown sod of the Garden. Dave Prince gladly paid for the cleaning bill for Hinkey's misfortune, and Franklin claimed the undisputed title as the top team in pro football for 1903. Prince, General Miller, and the others cleaned up on all the bets, so a dry cleaning bill was of no concern to the Franklin faction. The gambling winnings of the Franklin faithful were reported to be substantial. The Franklin News-Herald said an estimated amount of over $4,000 was won, and later reported that Prince and a buddy had so much cash bulging from their pockets after the game, they had to hire a cab to get them back to their hotel from Madison Square Garden. Several Watertown men had to wire for money to get back home, and even though the Red Blacks won the runner-up game on Saturday night over Orange 11-0, but the talk of championships in Watertown was seldom heard of again. General Charles Miller and Dave Prince went back to Franklin and announced that winning it all, they would not field an all-star squad in 1904 to defend the title. Revenge had not been made over rival Wales City, and it's not known if the team's major sponsor ever recouped all of his roster investment, but Major General and Manager Prince and all the others from Franklin claimed the pro football title on that small Pennsylvania town almost 100 years ago. A week or so later, newspapers around the country, including an excerpt from the Buffalo's newspaper, exalted Franklin's All-Stars and their claim to the 1903 professional football title. We thank you once again for joining us here on the Pigskin Dispatch, looking back at early football and especially pro football from this 1903 era. And we want to, let you know that we talk about football each and every day here on PigskinDispatch.com. And we welcome your feedback at PigskinDispatch@gmail.com. And also you can find us on your favorite podcast provider on PigskinDispatch.com or on the SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Till tomorrow, everybody, have a great gridiron day. We're taking a peek over at the chains and the down marker. It's 4th and long. We're going to have to punt the ball and get on out of here, but we'll have another series tomorrow for your football history headlines, so be sure to tune in. We invite you to check out our website, PigskinDispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. PigskinDispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast. PigskinDispatch.com is a proud affiliate of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of sports yesteryear.
Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandham at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at SportsHistoryNetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.